Today, we're going to be talking about rendering 3D characters and environments swiftly and artistically for illustrations and storyboards using DAZ and an application called PAINNT. DAZ is free, Paint is very cheap, and uh, the techniques that I show you, you'll be able to apply almost immediately. And I think you'll find that the kind of art that you can create is great for when you want to create products ranging from book covers and coffee cup um, mug uh, artwork, or for stuff you want to put on t-shirts, or for things you want to put on playing cards, or just almost any geometry that you might want to incorporate into a sales presentation or into a pitch book or into a uh, comic book that you happen to be creating. So the advantage of creating artwork using the tool sets that I'm going to teach you is that you own the artwork. So the images that you render uh, are images that you can incorporate and turn into products that you sell. And we'll talk a tiny little bit about that at the end of this particular event. Uh, The when you purchase geometry on the DAZ store for use in your work, and you make modifications to the geometry or change the clothes of the characters and so forth, the uh, the models, you can't give the models away to other people. Uh, you can't create interactive tools that render them in real time, so that people can see them in virtual reality or something like that. But what you can do is you can, or at least not without paying an extra license fee. But what you can do is you can render still images of them, and you can use them. Um, you can incorporate them into products that you sell. People do it all the time. So, with that in mind, let me go ahead and get rid of this little window because, as we all know, I can't think straight when it's here. Boop. And just a quick note, if you want to learn more about the events that I do, check out nancyfultonmeetups.com. I run, I support about 50,000 entertainment industry pros on meetup.com, and people connect to me from across the United States, and some people tune in even from outside the United States. The uh, If you want to get all of the work that I do and the more than 200 workbooks and videos that I've created over the last 5 years of creating content for writers, screenwriters, filmmakers, people that sell their expertise, authors, you can become a VIP Pro member, and you can find out more about that at nancyfultonmeetups.com. It costs $20 a month, or you can spend less per month if you decide to sign up for 6 months or for a year. Cool. So with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and dive into talking about using DAZ 3D to create illustrations. The first thing to understand is that being able to create your own illustration makes it much easier for you to produce your own comic books and kids books and art-based products, ranging from dishes to playing cards, film and TV projects. Because when you own the images you create, you can do more with them. When you license work from Pond 5 or from other, or when you hire someone to create artwork for you, there's limits to what you can do with the content as a rule. Like if you pay somebody to create a cover and you want to go ahead and make changes to that cover going forward, the licensing that you have for that cover, or the deal that you made with the creator of that work, may restrain you from being able to make changes to the cover over time. But when you create the artwork, you can pretty much do anything you want with it. In this workshop, we're going to be talking about how to make artistic images and illustrations in DAZ Studio. And for those of you that don't know, DAZ Studio is a free computer-aided modeling and animation application. It comes with free customizable characters and gives you access to the whole market where you can buy characters and machines and environments and costumes and special effects that you can use to create your own scenes. And DAZ is best known for creating photorealistic artwork and animation. And we've covered that in previous presentations. Today, we're going to be focusing on creating artistic images that look like they're drawn or sketched. When you get a chance, and at the end of this event, before I dive into sort of the live demo that I'm going to be doing, I'll show you where you get DAZ, and you'll see that it's free. We'll talk a little over the course of this event. We'll be talking for just a few minutes about how working with DAZ um, is easiest. First thing to understand is that DAZ Studio is entirely free and easy to install. It works on most Windows computers and most Mac computers. You'll find the system requirements on the bottom of the installation page. As long as you have permissions to install apps on your computers, you should have no problem installing the application. I want to mention one thing. On Macs, after you download the installation file, um, usually you have to right click on the file. You have to open it up in Finder. So go to Finder, open it up so you can see the file that got downloaded. And then normally, as people who install apps on Macs are well aware, you just double click the installation file and it automatically installs. When installing with this particular product, you may have to right click and choose open and then type your system administration password. And that's because it's requires you to say that you really do want to install this particular app on your computer, because it doesn't come from Apple, and it's not one of the Apple not one of the preferred Apple apps. In other words, it's DAZ is a company that's been running for a long time, and it doesn't sell its stuff through the App Store on your Macintosh. It sells it in the wild, so you may have to go through this extra step during the install process. Once usually when you install DAZ Studio, the first thing you do is you install this thing called DAZ Central. And DAZ Central is kind of like a home page for all of the things on your computer that have to do with DAZ. After you install DAZ Central, there'll be a button that says install DAZ Studio, and there'll be another one that says install the Genesis, 3 male and female characters, install the Genesis 8 male and female characters. And there'll also be links to tutorials, and there'll be a button that says shop, which will take you to a store where you can buy more things. And I want to mention right here, I haven't actually mentioned it in previous presentations, that when you buy models on the DAZ Marketplace, the first thing you should do before you go shopping on the DAZ Marketplace is close DAZ Studio. You then go to DAZ Central, click the shop button, buy whatever you want, and then after you finish the purchase, close DAZ Central and open it back up again. And what you'll find is that DAZ Central will have gotten all of the purchases that you've made on the DAZ store, and it'll be loaded into DAZ Central, so you can install it on your computer just by clicking the install button. So I mention that because it's possible to kind of screw up your installation. If you have DAZ Studio open, you go shopping, you go buy some models, and then you try to install them while DAZ Studio is open. Because what happens when you do that is that DAZ Studio, a lot of these things that you're installing, sometimes they have 20, 30, 50 files, different textures, different colors, etc., different geometry. Sometimes things get screwed up if you're trying to work in DAZ at the same time an installation is going on. So if you just close down DAZ and buy the stuff, then close DAZ Central. When you open it back up again, do the install, you'll find that when you open DAZ Studio, all of those resources that you've installed are available to you. This will make a lot of sense if you have used DAZ Central before. If you haven't, if you've never experimented with it, you'll understand as you start to use the product. Every so often, it is possible if you do actually mess up your DAZ installation, which has only happened to me, I think, once or twice. And I did it, I'm telling you how I did it. If you ever mess it up, what you do basically is you go into DAZ Central, uninstall everything. There's uninstall buttons, uninstall everything. And then there's an option that lets you delete DAZ Studio. You delete the DAZ Studio, you reinstall the DAZ Studio, and then you go make a change on the Smart Content tab that says to clear the content database. Once you reset the database, you just reinstall everything again, and it'll work as advertised. The whole process can really only take like half an hour. And you'll never have to do it if you follow my advice about closing DAZ Studio before you do any installs from DAZ Central. You won't have the problem. But if you did have the problem, it only takes about half an hour to fix. I put this into the workbook. It's just a quick overview of the user interface for DAZ Studio, and you'll be seeing me use it in a few moments. The menus, as you can see, are at the top of the screen. Here's the list of things that you can create right here along the left side. Down here at the bottom are where the animation tools are, which we have a tutorial that covered previously. Up here at the top are icons that allow you to move and rotate and copy things. There's other ways to do them as well. Down here is a thing that lets you sort of open and close windows. You can see these little teeny tabs on the side, so you can adjust how big the windows are and how small they are. And then this is the scene tab. Once you put a model in here, like a character, you'll see a list of all of the elements of the model here on the upper right side. And if you click on any item down here at the bottom, you'll see options that let you change what you've inserted. So if you install a character that has boots, the character will appear here. The boots will be one of the things in the list. You can click on it, and there'll be an option in here that lets you adjust the color of the boots. So, and I mentioned in passing, sometimes I'll mention a window. I'll say, open the environment window. You won't be able to find it. If you go up here where it says Windows, there's an option called Panes, and you'll see Environment as one of the panes in the long list. And panes are really these kind of tab-based things over here on the side. Each one of these little tabs, if you click on it, opens up a pane. So I just mentioned in passing, sometimes people say, well, I can't find that tab. And it's like, well, click on Window, click on Panes, and you find a whole list of all the tabs in the whole application. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and toggle into DAZ Studio now. And look, here's the live version of the thing I was just talking to you a minute ago. Now, if I click over here on the left side, I want to create something. So I'm going to click on Smart Content because that's where all the cool things are. And there's an option, it says Accessories, Anatomy, Animations, Cameras, Documents, Environments, Figures. I'm going to click on Figures. And I can see that I've got mechanical ones, which is I've got this weird bug, which I'm never ever going to create. And then I've got people. And if I click on the list of people, here's all the different kinds of people I can create. And I can click on any one of these characters and create it. I can also, once it's created, I can modify it to make them taller, thinner, there's a whole bunch of adjustment settings. And we have a whole tutorial that covers creating characters and making adjustments to them. For the sake of this particular project, I'm going to go ahead and click on Evil Clown. And when I double click him, you'll see he comes into the environment. And there is Evil Clown. Now, I can look at Evil Clown from any perspective by clicking and dragging this little cube, right? Here's the Evil Clown. Oh yes, how lovely Evil Clown is. And if I want to make adjustments to Evil Clown's position, I can go click down here where it says Poses. Notice there's an option that says by function, and here's a whole bunch of different options I can choose from. And there's, one of the things that you can buy in addition to the characters and so forth is you can buy poses. So you can have poses of people talking, poses of people dancing. In this particular case, I bought the superhero package. So what I have here is a whole list of superhero poses. And let me go see if I can find a good one I like the look of. And let's see, what's a good one? It looks like he's standing. Let's see what this looks like. Is that one a good one? Now, all I need to do is, now that he's selected over here, see it says Genesis 8 male. If I click on this guy, look. So this is, I've changed his complete appearance using the pose button. If I don't like that pose, I can double click another. Oops, sorry, I forgot to click on the little feller. Oop, double click on the little feller. Now it's saying right here, the preset you're applying is outside the limits. And what it's basically saying is this character, this pose was not created for this character. And that is true. So if I want to, I can apply it to the character anyway, see how it goes. And if I need to make individual adjustments to the character, I can easily do that just by manipulating his arms and legs directly. And let's see. Is there anybody else I like on this thing? All right, now, so you can see pretty much how easy it is to pick between different options for the character. Um, it's pretty easy to choose a different setting just by clicking. Now, so let's say we get something that looks, suitably monstrous. This is a good monster pose, right? If I want to make changes to his arms, for example, if I can click on his arm, and you'll see that in this long list of items underneath Genesis 8 male, which is my character, I've got his left forearm, and you'll see there's an option here that says bend, and I can also twist, right? And if I want to, I can click on his hand, and I can move that side to side, or I can bend it forward and back. That looks terrifying, doesn't it? Right. So now I can make the adjustment to any position, any body part I feel like. Now let's talk for a moment about rendering. When you want to render, there's a button up here that says render, and you can always click on the rendering button there. But normally on the side right here, one of the panes that's normally installed is the render settings button. And I want to talk for just a few minutes about what happens when you try to render in DAZ. Normally, when you click the render button, it takes literally forever. It takes a long time to render things. And there's a certain set of things you can do that will make it render a lot faster. One of them is that you can come up here to where it says progressive rendering. You can turn rendering quality enable off, and you can come up here and set maximum samples to 100. And what that does is it tells DAZ, look, I want you to do 100 passes when you render this thing. And after you do the 100 passes, I want you to stop. Now, if you've ever watched DAZ render, or when you get a chance, when you do decide to render, you'll see that DAZ does one rendering, like you press the render button right here up the top, and DAZ will start to render. And when it does, it'll get all the way to the bottom, and it'll have sort of created a picture. And then it'll do a second pass, and it'll make the picture better, and a third pass, and a fourth pass, and a fifth pass, and a sixth pass, and a seventh pass. Well, by default, if this render quality enable is on, it just keeps going until it thinks there's nothing, it can't, it's the best it can possibly be. If you turn that off and you set this to 100, it says, look, you do 100 passes and then you just stop. And especially when you're going to be creating illustrations, you need a good rendering, but you don't need to spend an hour waiting for a rendering. You don't need to spend half an hour waiting for a rendering. 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 3 minutes might be more than enough. And by setting this maximum samples button, you make that much easier. Now, the next thing that you might want to do is when you render, click the general button at the top of the screen. And you see here, this is where you set the resolution of the image that you're trying to create. In real life, if you were creating a book cover, you might be rendering sort of a 2000 wide by 3000 high image, pixels. You'd be running 2000 by 3000, let's say. The numbers would be different, but something along those lines. When that's a lot of pixels, and the bigger these numbers are, the longer the rendering will take. So when you're doing your first test renders to get an idea of what your thing's going to look like when it's done, set these numbers to smaller numbers. Like I usually sort of aim for like 1,000 to 1,200 or 1,250. I usually divide everything. Sometimes I'll render it 800 by 600 or something. The other thing is, see this aspect ratio button? This lets you determine if you're rendering a square image or a square image, or a landscape image, or a portrait image, right? This is how you sort of change what you're rendering in terms of shape. Now, previously, I had it sort of set to render a rectangular image. I'm just going to go ahead and arbitrarily set it to render a square image. It won't determine the speed for which your rendering happens. These numbers down here that control the aspect ratio don't really control speed. It's really these pixel numbers up here at the top. But if you change the aspect ratio numbers, it automatically updates these numbers here. And you want to, whatever kind of image you need, you want to go ahead and make sure that you've created you know, created basically a lower res image than you're going to need for final output, so that during testing, when you're rendering it, that you're not rendering this huge big image, you're just rendering, sort of a little test image until you get everything pretty much right. And then you can increase these numbers to larger numbers. So control the resolution and turn off the progressive rendering and set it to maximum samples. And you'll find your rendering actually goes 3,000 times faster. The other thing that makes good sense is to I'm going to go ahead and put some lights in, and I want to show you some tricks that make putting lights in easier. One thing that you can do is the easiest way, oddly enough, to create a light is to go to use the button at the very top of the screen of the video viewport, and select the view that you want the light that shows the direction from which you want the light to come. So I've selected top, and I'm looking down on this guy's head, and I can easily create a light and by saying create new spotlight, and I can say apply viewport transforms. And basically that says make my light look down on my character exactly the way my viewport's looking down on my character. And I can say accept. And now you can see that it's created like a light here. And you can kind of see it because it says spotlight right here, and that's a pretty good indication it's created a light. And if I click on parameters, you can see that it actually lets me set the color of the light. And if I wanted to, it would let me set the spread angle of the light, like the cone of light could be bigger or smaller. Like here's a tiny little cone of light, and then I can make it go larger. And it may be a little hard to see, but there's like this little circle that's getting bigger and smaller. So I'm going to go ahead and make it so I've got a little ring of light that's coming down from the top. The next thing I might want to do is just to make life exciting, I'm going to go ahead and make it red. And I think that'll make it just a little more dramatic. So I've got a red light coming down from on top. I'm going to go look at this critter from the front, and I'm going to create a light. So there's the top spotlight, which is pointing down. I'm going to create a front spotlight by clicking on create. And I'm going to click on new spotlight. And I'm going to say apply active view transforms, and I'm going to say accept. And now I've got a white light facing the front of this guy. And same as before, I'm going to go click on the options that let me control the spread. And I'm going to make it so if I wanted to, I could have a tight little spotlight, or I can have it zoom farther and farther out. I'm going to go ahead and zoom it so that it's fairly far out. So it's got red light coming down from on top, white light from the front. And the next thing that I'm going to choose to do is I'm going to set the strength of the lights. Now this is a little bit a little counterintuitive for a lot of people. I'm going to click on the light parameters. See, it says spotlight, parameters, photometrics, and see where it says luminous. This thing actually uses physical lighting terms. So I'm going to specify the number of lumens I want to send out through this light. And right now it's set at 1500. Generally speaking, you can increase this by adding a 0, and you will not overwhelm your scene with light. And in fact, what I end up doing usually is I set it to 50,000. So I hit it with 50,000 lumens to start. And I'm going to go click my other spotlight and make the light coming down from the top also be 50,000 lumens. And if you've ever created lights in this application, it seems like they're not doing anything. Chances are your lumen setting was just way too low. And if you don't make the lumens big enough, the light has relatively little effect in the scene. It's not a deeply satisfying situation. Now, so the final thing I want to do is I want to create a camera. And a moment ago, I showed you how to create lights by clicking the create button and clicking spotlight. Watch this. I'm going to click on create, and I'm going to go click on new camera. And I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to say copy active view. and it's going to say front view, and I'm going to say accept. So now I've got, if I come up here where it says front view and I've created a camera, you can see I've created it. Now I've made the camera the active viewport, right? And now if I make adjustments here, I'm adjusting the actual camera's position. But more importantly, I can also do this. I can come here and see it says camera, parameters, transforms. Transforms means location. So whenever you see the word transform, think in terms of movement, like movement on the X, movement on the right. X translate, Y translate, Z translate. Math people use the word translate to mean move. And since these applications are created by people who do a lot of math, instead of saying X move, Y move, and Z move, they say X translate, Y translate, Z translate. So I'm going to go ahead and use Z translate to move the camera down. And this is sort of good enough for rock and roll. All right, so let's say that this is the monster that I want to render. I would go ahead and click the render button. And normally you have different things you can choose to render. This is rendering with the NVIDIA iRay shader. And that's sort of the fastest shader that, sorry, not the fastest shader, the best shader that the application has. And by default, it's going to render it on with no background, right? So that's why it's got this checkered background. If I were to take this final rendered image, when it gets, it's right, as you can see, it's sort of done 30 iterations of this pass already, right? You can see that it's going over it again and again and again. It's going to get better and better and better as we move forward. Right? So this is what it considers to sort of be the final image, having done 100 passes on it. And I'm going to go ahead and call this Indaz Demon Claw. And you'll see it saving it by default as a JPG. I can save it as a PNG, and I can just, the only reason to save it as a PNG is it'll make this checkered background go away when I merge this into other scenes. It'll make this, what's checkered here, transparent. Now, I'm going to show you a couple more things. So when I created the lights and I put them in the scene, I got an additional setting down here on the render pane, the render settings tab. See where it says environment? Right now, it says environment mode, dome, and scene. I'm just going to tell it, listen, I just want you to use the scene only. So I don't want you to render any lights that I haven't put in. Normally, when you create objects in DAZ, in order to make them uniformly illuminated, DAZ basically puts them in a big white illuminated ball. And that ball sort of projects sort of an even level of light from every direction. And when you add more lights to the scene, you know, it more brightly illuminates some sections, but everything gets some even level of illumination. When you go to, after you create lights, if you go back to render settings and you say environment, scene only, that tells DAZ, do not render any illumination except the lights that I've put in the scene. And that does two things. One, it speeds up your rendering. And the second thing that it does is it makes it so your colors are much more dramatic, because the only light it's getting is from, in this particular case, two sources. So it's not going to be, it's not in a soft box. It's not in a white box. It's illuminating everything. The only illumination is coming from these two very bright sources. And the second thing I want to say is, let's say I want to put this critter on a white background or a black background. To make life exciting for you, on the right side of the screen, there's an environment pane. If you don't see this, which is not uncommon, you can find it by clicking on Window, Panes, and you'll find it in this long list of panes. If it weren't visible, you could come here and you could find the environment settings here. See right here? It says the checkbox means it's already visible, but if you can't find your environment pane, it's because it's not visible, and you can go to Windows, Panes, and turn it on. I'm just showing you can go here and say you want to put a backdrop, and you notice now it's put in a white background, right? So instead of rendering against a transparent background, it's rendering against a white background now. And now if I render, you'll see it's going to come back and it may look slightly different. And it's because I've turned off the extra illumination it was getting from the quote unquote dome. And I have turned off and I have also put it against a white background. I could put it against a black background if I wanted as well. So you can see that the colors are much more dramatic now, right? That's because I've turned off the um, the dome illumination that was keeping everything sort of evenly covered. And you will notice that it's doing its little 100 iterations and it's going pretty quickly. And in fact, it's going more quickly than it did last time. It's already on 70%, 80%. It's almost done with its rendering in just the few seconds that we've assigned it. So down here at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and make it save a JPEG, Demon Claw 2, and we'll go ahead and save it. So now I have two images. Let's see. Another thing I'll just mention in passing, I can have more than one camera. So I'm going to go put this thing on perspective view, right? And if I want, I can give myself sort of more of a top-down view. And once again, I can say create, new camera, apply active transforms, click on Mr. Accept, and then once again, I can adjust the, I can go ahead and show the camera view. I want camera 2 actually. Boop. And I can move the camera up and down, right? And if I wanted to, I can also zoom in and out. So if I wanted a close up on his creepy little face, I could do that. I could also click on his face and click on the creepy little thing up here at the top. If I make adjustments here, it's adjusting the position of the camera. All right, and I can go ahead, let's render this guy one more time, and then we'll go ahead and move into making things look artistic. Cool. Now, while it's cooking, I'll mention in passing that there's a huge number, it's totally possible to create your own models and characters using DAZ. Usually what people do is they go ahead and buy models and then make modifications to them. So you can totally choose to do that if desired. Or if you want, you can actually figure out how to create models, or you can actually hire people to create characters for you. All those things, of course, increase the cost. Generally speaking, people just buy models and make adjustments to them. There's applications that you can buy that will let you control the expression on a character's face, etc. And once again, I did cover that information in another one of the tutorials that I've done previously talking about how to use DAZ. So in this particular case, I'm just talking about how to render, not necessarily how to control the character stuff, because I have other tutorials that cover that. All right, so here's our little creepy guy. And once again, and I'm going to call this guy the close-up. And we're going to make him a JPEG and say save. All right, that was a good time. Let's go ahead and dive into making things pretty. So I just want to take 2 seconds here. So I've showed you how to, I've been working with one character. I haven't been screwing around with his clothes or anything like that. I've just been messing around with this character. But you can see that, I could put this character in any environment. I've got like a billion to choose from, everything from caves to haunted houses that have rooms and furniture inside to palaces, etc. I've got, in addition to all that, I've got whole sets of props. I've got landscapes. I can put them in a park with a whole bunch of foliage. I can put them on a beach. I can put them, so there's a huge number of, I've been showing you a single character. I haven't been putting a backdrop behind him. I could have chosen to. If you want more complex illustrations, you can certainly create them. I just wanted to get something that would render quickly. All right, so having done that, I'm going to go ahead and exit, save as scene. I'm going to call this in DAZ Demon Claw. And I'm naming the file so I can get back to it later if I want to make changes. And now I'm going to go ahead and close this guy. Now, the reason I'm doing that is because we're going to dive into Paint. So when I click on Paint, this application, I think I'm spending all of $30 a year on it. You can try it for free. You can buy it by the week for like $5 a week, but save yourself a lot of grief and just spend 20 bucks on it. I don't get paid any money if you buy it or don't buy it. I don't really care, but I'm saying you'll be happiest if you just buy it. You can use this tool on any image that you want to, any image that you like, any image at all. So whether you can use it for photographs, you can use it for the images that we've been rendering, you could use it for anything. And if I click on, once I go into Paint, in order to start modifying geometry to make it look illustrated, I'm going to go click on, for example, Sketch. And here's a whole bunch of things that you can use to actually make something look like a sketch. And you never really know what's going to work until you open it up and start goofing around with it. So I'm going to go ahead and try Paint. Let's see. It's one of my favorite ones. Actually, I have favorite ones. I'm going to go click on Gnomon. I like Gnomon for some reason. Doesn't always look good, but what the heck, we'll try it out now. Really low resolution image, you get really low quality, you get really low quality artwork. So remember what before I said where you had to set the resolution of your image? And I said, you might render it 800 by 600 or 1000 by 1000 or something. When you actually want to bring it into this application, you want to go ahead and make sure that you render it at a higher resolution than that. Because if you don't, you'll get something, but it's just not going to be really pretty. You can see that it's a high resolution image. I think I did 200 passes on this one when I set the rendering settings instead of only 100. And I also, it's a slightly higher rendered resolution than the one that we just did. Now, if I go look at it in the Paint application, you can see that it's turned it into something that looks like a sketch. And I can experiment with the options here where it says hard light, multiply, soft light, original. Original doesn't look very original, does it? And I can sort of keep experimenting with adjustments until I find something that I like. Now, if I wanted to, I could actually, after I do this, take it into another application and refine it even more, right? So what I'm basically looking for is a look that I like, so that I can choose to make adjustments to it. I can click another filter option, for example, graphite. I can choose current input, and it'll bring it in, it'll give me another option. So you basically just keep messing around until you find a look that you like. And it may be the case that once you've chosen it, you use it over and over and over again. All right, so Onisis Heath, which looks great. But you can imagine that if you were trying to put that in a book, because you were trying to do, some sort of crazy kids book about a haunted gazebo, that it would kind of be too real. You're looking for something that's more like something somebody might sketch in an 18th or 19th century book. So what I'm going to do is take Onisis Heath into Paint. So I'm going to come into Paint, and I'm going to go find Onisis Heath. Now, in this particular case, I've put it at medium. So that's actually really, the Onisis Heath image is actually relatively large. If I go ahead and I say, what's it look like if I put it its original resolution, it might look marginally better. Let's go ahead and check on Newman. And we're going to just check the same input. Now you can imagine that if I were telling a story about, something like the Phantom Toll Booth, and I want to be able to have illustrations on my book or inside my book, this might work really well. And remember, if I set it at the original resolution, if I'm assuming that I'm going to create a kid's book which is, sort of a large landscape book, I might decide to render this, 4,000 by 3,000. So it'll be a really beautiful drawn image. It'll be a rendered image first that I rendered in DAZ, and then I'll bring it in here and I'll make it really pretty using these tools. When I want to save this final version, I can click on Save and Share, and then I can name the file Onesis. And usually I try to incorporate the name of the filter I'm applying, Onesis Nomad. And I can say Save. I can use this Onesis save, and I can put it on cards. I can put it on stationery. I can put it on in a book. I can incorporate it into an advertisement. I could do 5 billion different things with this because I actually own this piece of artwork because I created it. So let's go ahead and dive back into our presentation again. All right, so diving back into our presentation, remember we talked about much faster rendering? And I said, create lights to illuminate your characters. Then on the render settings tab, click environment. Then at the top under environment, choose scene only. We talked about that. We talked about click general and set your resolution to lower numbers. You can increase them whenever you decide. When you render an image in DAZ and you like the way it looks, then you can go ahead and increase this to the final resolution that you need for your finished piece of artwork, which is usually going to be at 300 dots per inch. So if you need a 10 by 10 image, you're going to make it 3000 by 3000. On the render settings tab, click progressive rendering, turn render quality enable off, then under maximum samples type 100. Now, if you set this number too low, you're going to see jagged things when you take it into Paint. So you might want to, as you, when you're creating your final rendering, you might want to change this to 200 or 300 just to make sure that you get a really smooth edges on the geometry. You have to close DAZ before you start using Paint to edit your images because they both rely on the same hardware on your computer, at least for the Macintosh. Maybe on a PC, it won't be the same, but I think it will be because I think the real issue is it needs to be able to render. And if DAZ has grabbed the rendering resources so that it can render things, then Paint doesn't have them. So what'll happen when you try to render is that Paint will basically just kind of stall, or sometimes it'll crash. It won't actually finish rendering an image. So close DAZ before you start using Paint. And this talks about how to use Paint to adjust images. Select a filter, select the image, select a resolution, adjust the Paint settings, save the file, click back, and you can experiment with multiple filters to find the image that you like. Let me go ahead and dive just for a second into DAZ 3D. What usually happens is you install DAZ Central, and once DAZ Central is installed, you click Install DAZ 3D, and once DAZ 3D is installed, you go ahead and install the Genesis characters. You get Genesis 2, Genesis 3, Genesis 8, or whatever. Install some Genesis characters so you have some people to work with. And they give you a few default costumes and stuff, but nothing very exciting. Once you get that stuff all installed, you usually go shopping to buy bits that you need to produce with. So now let's go talk about the buying bits you need part. You can see that you can spend as little as you want or as much as you want buying stuff. And they have freebies available all the time, right? Weekly freebies. If I click on this, you can always find free stuff that you can buy and install into your computer. And from day to day, it'll be something different, right? So it's just a huge number of assets and resources. And then there's a whole bunch of environments. Like I can buy the Botanical Space Lab for $13. And there's a spaceship bedroom right here, so $21. If I click on Botanical Space Lab, you'll see I get all of this geometry. So I don't have to create a lot of stuff. I can just buy stuff that already exists. And then I can render it any way that I want. Now, because I'm buying this on the DAZ site, the images that I render are mine to do with as I wish. I can't take the models and give them to other people. I can't take the 3D models and give them to other people, but any image that I render using these tool sets are images that I can use. So I can take my monster character and put it here on this, climbing on the walls of this deck. And I can render that and I can turn it into an image that I incorporate into my book. As you can see, it's pretty useful, right? It gives you the independence and the autonomy that you need in order to make your own artwork that you own, that you can incorporate into your own products and projects. And I think that that's a very useful tool. They have other kinds of animals too. For example, I can say mouse, right? So if I want to tell a story about a mouse, or I want to have animal characters, I can literally buy them. I can buy textures. I can buy clothing. For example, I can say, show me your high heel collection. It's got a whole bunch of different kinds of high heel shoes, right? I can say, show me weapons, right? So I recommend when you get a chance that you spend a little time experimenting with these sort of tools, um, and seeing what's available and thinking about what you want to incorporate for your particular artwork. Be buying a lot. It makes sense to sort of join their PC Plus club, and because you basically save like 30% more. And I don't get a kickback from anybody for recommending these guys. I'm just saying I happen to know that, you do save a lot of money if you use the PC Plus thing, because I actually am that. And whenever I buy something and I do the checkout, instead of spending um like instead of spending $16, I may spend less. So, you know, I end up saving a lot of money on the purchasing. So I mentioned that I covered this topic before, and I've created several workbooks and sort of primers that review working with DAZ in terms of creating opposing 3D characters, animating characters if you want to create animated sequences. I covered stuff about how to use Canva in another workshop. I covered how to publish books on Amazon in about 2 hours, how to publish interactive books on Amazon in about an hour, how to sell your creative work swiftly. There's a pro self-publishing workbook, and there's tools to talk about how to promote books with BookFunnel. And there's a thing about how to swiftly package and sell your work in order to earn more. And that basically talks about all the different places that you can create an image and put it on a coffee cup, put it on a t-shirt, etc. So if you want all that stuff, you can become a VIP Pro member. So let me go ahead and dive into to check out the questions that we got. So is it possible to upload or create our own initial anything? Yes, there are tools that you can find when you go to DAZ. They have tools that interface with Bryce, that interface with 3D Studio Max, that in interface with other 3D modeling tools. Just realize that when you do that, you're going to spend a bunch of time creating 3D models. If you don't mind doing that, that's totally fine. But you can buy models. So it really depends on how you want to spend your time. Thing is, I'll just point out the economics of that situation, right? Let's say that you're a writer, for example, or let's say that you're a filmmaker, or let's say that you are a book author. You can choose to go and spend, $20 or $30 buying a character and a bunch of an outfit to put him in. At the let's say you really went whole hog and spent $30 on all that stuff, and that would be $30. Now, how much of your time does $30 buy? About an hour at the most, right? I mean, you cannot. So if you had to create that stupid character and you had to go buy that, you had to create that geometry, you're now talking about 2 or 3 or 4 days, and especially if you don't even know how to do 3D modeling. So generally speaking, it's better to buy the stuff and mix and match to create the thing that you want, because you'll spend less time, but by spending less time, you'll spend less money, right? It's just you do not want to be a filmmaker who gets has to spend the next year becoming an expert 3D modeler in order to use DAZ, when you can literally just buy stuff off the shelf that's close enough for rock and roll, and it allows you to create the lookbook that you need in order to sell your TV show, or to sell your or if you're creating a comic book, you can spend time actually creating the story and rendering the images that you're going to put into the comic book pages without having to figure out, to literally model each character by hand. It just takes too long. Sarita asks, can you have more than one character per scene? Absolutely. I was keeping things simple. I did not want to put in, like, the more characters you put in, the longer it takes to render. And I'm conscious of the fact that you guys are sitting here watching me render. You can change skin color. You can make people older. You can make people younger. There's tools, like, for example, ethnicity for Genesis, Native American. Ethnicity for Genesis, African. If I look at hair, there's thousands of different hair types. And they usually go with different characters. So, for example, this is Genesis 8 female hair. It's called, charming style. Here's poppy hair for Genesis 8. There's Kayla hair. You can buy elderly people, and you can buy stuff that makes people look old. So if I say old, aging, just figuring out what to type. So there's like an aging bundle. So see where it says body shapes for children, Genesis 8 female. Basically, it lets you take a Genesis 8 character and turn it into a child. So Gigi, you can certainly add more than one person to an illustration at a time. All right, so there's my demon, right? And then I say, you know what? My demon should be in an interesting environment. So I click on environments, and I go find, this looks like something. Let's click on it. All right, so now my demon's in an environment. Decide to look around. Right, so now there's my environment. So I've got the character, I've got an environment. And if I want to, I can bring in another guy. So let's go ahead and go click on Smart Content, and we're going to go click on our little friend Figures, and let's bring in Supergirl. Supergirl has not had enough to do. Click on Supergirl. The question is, where did my Supergirl go? Oh, look, there's Supergirl. She's not a bright person because she's on top of my demon, but what you gonna do? And I'm gonna go click on Genesis female, right? So there it is. And I'm just gonna go ahead and drag her. So now I have Supergirl in the same scene as our weird little demon. So we cover this in other tutorials. You should go ahead and, when you get a chance, go ahead and take a look at all the stuff you can do with your little characters when you feel so inclined. Two characters in a scene, and there's three-dimensional geometry as well. All right. I enjoyed running these events. I'll have another one next week. If you have questions about anything I teach you, you're always welcome to send me an email. I can't teach you how to use DAZ, but they have a whole bunch of tutorials, I should mention, that go to dive deep. And if you go into YouTube and you click DAZ Studio, you'll see they have a whole bunch of tutorials there. The information that I teach when I'm teaching DAZ is specifically related to the information I think that writers, screenwriters, filmmakers, and producers need to know, because they're using it for an illustration, using it to create illustrations, or using it to create animatics and to figure out stunts and stuff. I had a really good time hanging out with you tonight. I hope you had a good time too. And I look forward to hanging out with you guys again next week. Talk to you soon.